Hello everyone, welcome to KK4Z. My name is Scott, and this is a continuing series of the IC705 versus the FTX1. Um, I still have the radio. I still kind of like it. I muck with it a little bit at home. I haven't been able to get outside. We've had bad weather, and then plus I've had lots of honeydews and all sorts of neat things to do besides radio. But I still like the radio. Yeah, it has its shortcomings, but in general, I kind of like it. And today, I want to touch base on the Rob Sherwood numbers as a means of comparison between the two radios. Now, I want to start by saying that when I watched the presentation by John at Yaesu during Hamvention, he said that the radio is going to have the performance similar to the FT710. And I was kind of excited about that because I have an FT710. It is one of my field radios, and I happen to like that radio. It does a good job. And so recently I took a look at the Rob Sherwood numbers, and sure enough, Rob did do the FTX1 and has posted. It's been out for a while. I don't check Rob a whole lot, but every now and again, to satiate my curiosity, I'll go in and check his stuff. So I want to start with the kind of a little background about the Rob Sherwood numbers. Now, the numbers that everybody likes to quote is the dynamic range narrow spaced blocking in the 2 kilohertz range, and that's the number that everybody likes to quote, and I think a lot of times it's taken out of context. And really what that number is for, it is for contesters who do CW. That's what that number is really for. That is the real test. And like I showed earlier, the test I did during the CW CW test, both radios did comparatively well during a contest-like environment. So what Rob Sherwood says, and if you research his stuff a lot, you'll see it, is that for a minimum standard for the 2 kilohertz spacing dynamic range, you need to have a minimum of 80 dB. That's 80 dB. If you are a contester, add another 10 to that, so that's a 90 dB. So when you see these, when you see the FT710, which I think is 107, I have a Kenwood 890, which is also like either 105 or 107. That's well above what you really need. And but getting back to what I was talking about is Johnny Yaesu said that the FTX1 would have performance similar to the FT710, which the FT710 is pretty good. I think it's still number 3 or number 4 on the top of that list. However, when I looked at Rob Sherwood's numbers, it's not quite that high. And we'll start out by looking at the ICOM's number. The ICOM 705 has, for the narrow space dynamic blocking, it has 88 dB. Okay, and I've never had any issues with that using it the way I use it, which is like POD activations, casual CW or whatever, and even a little, kind of contesting. So it's an 88. The FTX1, according to Rob Sherwood, is 91. That's 3 dB. An S unit, one S unit, is 6 dB. So you could say that it's about a half an S unit difference, and probably under laboratory conditions, you'd be able to discern that difference. However, when you're talking about being out in the wild with radio propagation, QRN, which is nature-produced noise like stag crashes and stuff. You probably can't tell the difference. And the other thing that you may want to consider is that when Rob Sherwood does these tests, he's using one radio, sometimes two, but he's using one radio out of a group of thousands. So statistically, it's not accounting for the variability. An example might be, let's say that he picked the 705 he tested was at the lower range of their standard deviation, and other 705s may be up around 90. Another scenario might be the FTX1, excuse me. That may be at the top of the range, and taking a standard deviation for manufacturing, it may come down. And so when you're talking 3 dB and you're only using a sample size of 1 for each model, I'm going to say statistically speaking, they're probably about equal. And that's I come from a manufacturing background, and I have used statistical process control and understand about tolerance buildups or whatever. But really, as far as the in use, they're probably just about equal, 1-to-1. I mean, when I did my test, I thought that maybe the FTX1 maybe had a very slightly better blocking, but I don't know. So again, that's a Rob Sherwood numbers, and the numbers that we always miss when we talk about radios is the noise floor. In other words, how low is the noise floor, which means how weak a signal can you hear. And with this number, the more negative the number, the better the noise floor, or the lower the noise floor. And in this circumstance, I'm only going to talk about unmodified noise floor. In other words, no attenuation, no preamps, just the basic receiver. In this case, the ICOM has a noise floor of -127, and the Yaesu FTX1 has a noise floor of -124. Again, pretty darn close, and it kind of bears this out when I did the receiver test. The ICOM does appear to hear itty bitty bit more than the Yaesu. One of the reasons why I'm not using the preamps in there, because typically, again, outside the laboratory, when you start kicking in preamps, you're also bringing in more noise. And sometimes it's that noise that's blocking out the signal, especially with CW. Now, for me, I can hear and pull out CW signals in the noise. Now, how far down I go, I don't know. Probably at least 1S unit, maybe a little more. I don't know. I never measured it. But if I introduce more noise, and then it raises the noise above that signal a little bit more, even though it's amplifying the signal, then I can't hear it. So again, a quick video. I just really want to touch on this. It came out, like I'm saying in a lot of different places, that the FTX1 and the 705, as far as receiver performance, according to Rob Sherwood, are pretty much dead equal. And so again, whichever radio you're happiest with or think you'll be happiest with, get that radio. There are things I like about the FTX1, and there's a lot of things I like about the 705. I've had the 705 longer, And today, today, if I can only choose one, I would take the 705. That's today. But that doesn't mean down the road, as ICOM pushes firmware updates and improves the radio, that I couldn't change my mind. I changed my mind about the 710. I had two 710s. The first one I got right when they came out. I didn't like it. It wasn't done. I traded it off. Then a year or two later, I kind of reviewed the updates and I bought my second one, and this one I'm keeping. So I'm going to try not to make that same mistake with the FTX1. I'm just going to hang on to this one and go through the update cycle and see how it turns out. Because there's things about it I like. And so, anyhow, that's it. Just a quick video about, about what I found with Rob Sherwood's numbers. And this, the FTX1 is not the same level as the FT710. And that was kind of, talked about during Hamvention, but it's not. It's a 91 versus a 107. I mean, that's still a very acceptable performance, but it was a little misleading. So anyhow, you all take care. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for checking in, and I'll just update as I find interesting things about the radio. So 73s, and take care. This is Scott, KK4Z.